All right, we're going to go ahead and get going. I think others will be joining us, but welcome. My name is Caitlin Latta. I am an Associate Director of Admission at Denison University. Really excited to have you here for this Athletics and Admission at Division III institutions presentation. I'm going to let our caller introduce herself, and then I'll have my colleague introduce herself. So, Amanda.
Hi, everyone. My name is Amanda Daniels. I'm the head women's lacrosse coach at Denison. I've been there for 7 years now, so going on 8. And excited to be here. Sorry that I had to call in. You know, Wi-Fi issues is getting us all these days. So, but excited to talk to you all and answer some questions and just go from there.
And then Allie, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. I'm Allie Singer. I'm a Senior Assistant Director at Denison in the Office of Admission. I just finished up my first year in the office, which is kind of crazy to think. But I'm just helping with the question and answer. I'm helping moderate today. So I'll be in and out. You might hear my voice, but I'm really just going to leave it up to Caitlin and Amanda to really share their experiences in athletics.
Yeah, so as Allie just said, if you have questions, we are happy to answer those throughout. If you just use the Q&A feature here, that's where Allie's going to be focusing most of her attention. There'll be times for questions and answers at the end, but without further ado, we will go ahead and get going. So an overview of what we're going to be talking about today. This is, while Amanda, Allie, and I are all from Denison, this is really a larger athletics and athletic admission across Division III. So we'll be using some Denison examples, but it's not just about Denison. We're going to be talking about divisional differences in athletics, some institutional considerations, things that you should be thinking about as you begin your recruitment process or as you go through it. The recruitment timeline. I know that there are people from all different years here, so depending on where you are in terms of your high school year, where you might want to be in terms of your athletic recruitment, kind of recruiting how-tos, an admission timeline because that's important in this, and then a time for question and answer. So institutional considerations. Before we really dive into the athletic piece, we thought it was important to talk about some other things to think about as you kind of hone in on which schools you are going to really go after coach-wise. So outside of athletics, there are a number of factors to think about. As you can see here, so size. Are you going to want a large institution, a small institution? Residential sometimes can be a piece of that size as well. Do you want it in a remote place, in a city? All things to think about as you think about which schools you are going to ultimately apply to. Location, big city, small town. Maybe you're from California like I am. I'm out here in Los Angeles. Maybe you're dying for winter, so you're going to go somewhere else. Maybe it's the opposite. You're ready for some California sunshine, so you're going to think about West Coast schools. Academics. Do they have your major? Do they have the academic culture that you want? Competitive versus collaborative? Are you going to be able to create relationships with faculty if that's something that's important to you? And then the cost of an institution and the aid for which you might be eligible. We're going to cover that a little bit more later, but definitely something to think about because cost of attendance is very high at many institutions. So that's kind of outside of athletics. And then inside of athletics, just the athletic culture of the school. Is it really important to you to have a lot of athletic spirit? Are you just happy to play? The coach, we'll talk about that. It's very important that you get along with the coach and the coach gets along with you. And then team success. So what is success? How does a coach define it? And how important is that to you? So just some things to think about on a larger scale. Now I'm going to let Amanda talk a little bit about the different divisions. So go.
All right. Thank you. So, you know, obviously we all know there's Division I, which is kind of that highest level of competition. Athletic scholarships are offered there. So, you know, that's kind of the biggest difference between D1 and D3 in a lot of ways. Obviously, the level of competition is higher. And again, just I'll be speaking more so from my own experience, but this is generally true throughout all sports as far as, Division I is really big. So, you could play at a top 10 D1 school and, have a chance to go compete for a national championship, kind of that sort of thing. Or you could be in a lower level D1 school. And a lot of times kind of those lower level D1 schools, competitiveness wise and like skill level wise, are comparable to maybe the best in D2 and the best in D3. So, that sort of level of competition in D1 really spans a large kind of thing. So you just kind of need to be aware of that and what kind of experience you're looking for kind of with that. And so Division II, they have athletic scholarships as well. There's just less to offer. So, you're not going to get a full ride there. And even getting a full ride in Division I is not that easy to come. It's really not easy to get, right? A small percentage of student athletes will actually get a full ride somewhere. But there's just less athletic money available at D2. Division II is smaller. It's the smallest division out of the three. So, it's just a different level of competition there as well. And then Division III, as it says right there, is the largest in the NCAA. And there are no athletic scholarships available. So, in no way will you be getting any sort of athletic aid. You will still obviously be eligible for financial aid and merit aid, and kind of depending on the school and how they do all of that. And so again, there's a big range of competitiveness in this division as well, because it is so large. So, I just think it's, that top kind of 30%, maybe, let's just say, are really kind of all have that ability to kind of compete for that title. I think it's harder in Division I as you kind of get lower to do that. And that's not what it's all about necessarily. So just as kind of something to think about. And then the NAIA is a small independent athletic league. So it's governed by a different body. So the NCAA Division I, II, and III are obviously all governed by the NCAA, and the NAIA is its own independent athletic league. So there is athletic money available there as well. Again, it's just less, kind of less there, and less sports are not all the sports are always necessarily involved in that league. So is that enough? Just as a general sort of description of the divisions?
Yeah, I think that's great. It's just important. This is obviously a presentation more on Division III, but it's important to think about when you're going through your process, like what are you wanting and what are you looking for? I would also say we're going to focus on the D3 timeline, but the timelines, right, Amanda, can change a little bit depending on which division you're being recruited for. Absolutely.
That, and just even by sport, it can change a lot as well. So it's just important to ask that question as you're going through the process and do your homework a little bit.
Yeah, I also think it's important to just realize that athletics do exist at a non-Division I level, which might sound kind of silly to say, but a lot of people just think about the sports teams at, the schools that I put here, Stanford, UCLA, USC. I'm naming all California schools for some reason today, but you can play competitive sports at other levels. That's the point of this slide. So the next slide is about the athletic timeline. And we can, you can look at this, Amanda can kind of go through what she expects as a coach. This is very broad, and we're also going to talk about how it can vary. Amanda, do you want to kind of talk about what you expect in terms of your timeline?
Yeah, absolutely. So I will speak more specifically for me, but then I'll try to kind of go broader from there. So for us in our timeline, pretty much if you're in 9th and 10th grade and you reach out to us, that's fantastic. Like, you should be thinking about the schools that you're interested in and starting to get on coaches' radars and all of that stuff. But, at that point, we're probably not going to, we'll respond, obviously, and all of that's really important academically to always be working on that, and athletically, and we'll see you play if we can see you play. We'll watch a video if you send us a video. We'll always talk to you and all of that. But, you know, like right now, we're largely, like if we're talking like this moment right now, August 4th, like we are largely focusing on our 2022 class. So that's that rising junior class. So again, like we've gotten emails from 9th and 10th graders, and that's all great. Some we've gotten to know. If you're able to go to a prospect day in those first 2 years of school, if you're interested in, that's always a great idea. It gets you to see some campuses as well. And, you know, but at that point, we're not necessarily going to be the aggressor, if that maybe isn't the best word, but as far as like reaching out to you all the time, like if you continue to reach out to us, we know you're still interested. And when it's our time or when we have that opportunity to watch you play live, you know, whether that's in 10th grade or 11th grade, like we're going to do it. So, you know, just kind of understand that those first few years, while it is really a great thing to start thinking about it, not getting a lot of attention back isn't a bad thing. It doesn't mean that schools aren't interested in you. And again, this is speaking for me personally, but also for the D3 level, because we're all kind of on that, you know, in my opinion, more realistic timeline of we're not expecting you to try to make a decision at earliest junior year, you know, but even later than that. So just kind of keep that in mind. And if you still like a school and interested in a school, keep emailing and stay in touch. So, you know, that's kind of those first few years. You know, by the time you get to that kind of summer after 10th grade, that's a great time, if not before, to kind of start to try to visit some campuses, narrow that list down. You know, it's hard to, you know, that list that Caitlin went through at the beginning as far as institutional considerations, that's an easy thing to go through and kind of be able to create your list off of. But really, it's common to kind of get caught up on like, well, I don't know if I want a small school or a big school, or I think I want this. And you may not know that until you go visit and really get to see them. So the next important thing with, you know, as your junior year is, you know, being able to take the SAT and the ACT, which I know has been a problem recently, but it will be back. But just to continue, you know, to narrow that list down, contacting coaches, asking for feedback, you know, that sort of thing, because they should all be seeing you play at that point if they truly are interested. And just, you know, keeping up with that. Get on the phone, ask questions, have a list of questions, you know, and just kind of go through things. And again, so for us, like going through this summer as we're, you know, really starting to focus on our rising junior class in high school, you know, we're happy to talk on the phone. We're hopefully going to get to see them all play this fall. And then, you know, kind of through that fall season, once we've seen you all play, then we go and try to set up more phone calls and get, you know, our top prospects to come visit campus and, you know, kind of become more of that. And again, I don't know if aggressor is the best word, but become more of that kind of leader of the process in a way of just like, we seen you play, we think you have potential, we want you to come visit. But just understand it's always a two-way street. Like there needs to be interest from you and from the coaches as well. And, you know, for us, like generally we have our class done I mean, it just kind of depends on the year. This year's been a little slower than the last previous years, which is understandable. So it's totally fine. But we're mostly done with our 21 class. It doesn't mean we're completely done. But just always ask that question, like, where do I stand? Is there an opportunity for me? You know, do you accept walk-ons and tryouts? And just always ask those questions if you're unsure of where you stand. Don't assume you have a spot and don't assume you don't have a spot, right? So just always ask if you're not sure. You know, then it's kind of going through the application process. So let's say it all works out fabulously, right? We want you to come to Denison or wherever it is that you want to go there, and we're all excited about it. So that's when that kind of quote unquote commitment, verbal commitment can sort of happen. And that may be before or after you filled out an application. Largely for us in women's lacrosse at Denison, it's before, and that's just how it's worked out for us. That's not going to be the same in every sport. So all of our applicants come in and go early decision, and which is great because you kind of have it a little easier. You fill out the one application, and and then you're done, and you get to just enjoy your senior year. So that's kind of the dream scenario in my opinion. But it doesn't. You're not doing anything wrong if it doesn't work out that way. So that's again kind of a quick run through of your 4 years and all of that. I'm sure you'll have questions on this one.
Yeah, and we'll definitely, I know Amanda mentioned early decision. We'll talk a little bit later about that admission timeline, because some of you might not know what is early decision. So we'll get into that a little bit deeper, as well as she talked a little bit about recruiting right now. I know that I've had a lot of questions as the athletic liaison at Denison about recruiting in COVID. And so we'll touch that a little bit more with whatever we can give you. So yeah, it's also just really important. I'm going to say this throughout, and it says this on this slide and other slides. It really depends on the sport, right? While the women's lacrosse team at Denison is almost done with this class, there are definitely sports, I just want to reiterate this, even though Coach Daniel said it so eloquently, there are definitely sports where you can apply regular decision and go all the way through, and they are recruiting until the very end. So really important to ask questions.
Yeah, and just quickly, sorry, and even just in women's lacrosse, again, remember Division III is so big. So we just happen to be kind of on the faster end of that timeline. But even in women's lacrosse, there are coaches and schools that are recruiting up to the very end as well. So there's always a spot, whatever sport it is that you're looking for, there's always a place that is right for you, I think is just one thing to kind of keep in mind. It might not be what your first vision was for it, but it is out there.
Yeah. So now kind of some of the more nitty gritties. So I'm going to let Coach Daniels talk a little bit about what an official versus unofficial visit is. We've kind of talked about some of this, but Coach Daniels, could you talk a little bit about what are those?
Yeah. So an unofficial visit is really any visit to campus where you are getting there on your own, essentially. And it's really just any visit that doesn't involve kind of an overnight visit with a player from that team that you're visiting with. I feel like is the easiest way to kind of differentiate between it. So if we have a recruit coming to visit and they go on a campus tour and I meet with them and they have lunch with the team and go to a class and then, stay in their hotel with their parents and then go home the next day, however that works, that's an unofficial visit. They come for a game, unofficial visit. So if we invite someone to campus and then we have them spend the night basically on campus with one of our players, that is the biggest kind of difference as far as what makes it an official visit. There's also some other things where some schools might be able to pay for certain parts of your visit, like Division I especially. I mean, if they're flying you out there and, all of that, I mean, that, that also can make it an official visit. I feel like at Division III, it's pretty easy to keep things unofficial, and that's not a bad thing. It's just, because you can only have one official visit kind of with each school. So you can have as many unofficial visits as you want at Division III. So that's really nice. And the fact that it's, pretty easy to keep it an unofficial visit as well.
Yeah. So you can sign up for a campus tour with the Office of Admission, go to a class that my office might help organize, and then go talk to Coach Daniels or any of her colleagues, and that's unofficial. It's important to somewhat know the difference between these two, especially as you get a little bit later in your process. Also, they're really Coach Daniels has already kind of explained some of the ways that recruitment happens, but they're really kind of two different camps, the coach-driven recruitment and then the student-driven recruitment. And I feel like Coach Daniels has done a really great job of especially highlighting the student-driven, and don't be worried if they don't answer you at the beginning. But can you talk about camps and how do you hear about those, Coach Daniels, and tournaments and Do you tell a coach if you're going to be at a tournament? Like, what do you suggest?
Yeah. So, you know, a lot of schools will have kind of either prospect days, and so the on-campus camp sort of opportunities, either prospect days, which are more of a single day event. Like we typically have one in the fall where, you know, we invite anyone who's kind of shown interest to come, and it's a full day. So it's really great because it's, you know, you get to go on a tour, you get to hear someone talk from admissions, you get to spend time with players, and then we get to have a little clinic portion, which really is just like, you know, get to know us as coaches, and we get to see you in a different way that wouldn't be, you know, able to be done at a tournament where we're just watching you play, because we get to interact in a different way. And so, you know, same idea for a camp, which just might be a little longer. More lacrosse is generally involved in a camp than, you know, an hour-and-a-half clinic at a prospect day. So they're just great opportunities to get on campus. And so if, you know, if you have a school that you know you really like, or even just want to explore further, you know, it's a great opportunity to kind of do it all at once. And so we really love those events. It's not a make or break a thing for us by any means. I just think it does kind of offer different insights for all of us, which can be really beneficial. For off-campus tournaments and highlight reels, that's something that you absolutely should be telling us and communicating with those coaches. And so always, you know, for us in women's lacrosse and girls lacrosse, like the fall is a huge tournament time, as is the summer. And so, you know, we, at least in our situation at Denison, if someone doesn't tell us they're at a tournament, generally we're not going to be watching them play, because we have, you know, 50 to 100 other people who are reaching out to us like, can you watch me play this weekend? And so we're going to watch those people who ask us to watch them play. Again, that's not always the situation, even in lacrosse, but for us it is. And so it's always important to, again, because it's just showing your interest. Like, will you come watch me play means I'm interested in your school and I want you to see me play. Same with highlight reels, always send those. I think now it's so easy just to have that link. And honestly, I don't know if it's super important to spend a lot of money on a highlight reel. It's something that just kind of, even giving just clips or a half of a game, I'm happy to watch sort of thing. But if you do have a highlight reel, it is a nice kind of complimentary, you know, thing for us to go back and either just kind of review or remind ourselves, or, you know, watch that initial of like, oh yeah, you definitely see potential, and then see them play live, you know. But for me, it's a hard thing to rely only on, and I know that might need to change a little bit with everything that's going on, but there are games happening too. So, you know, it's always a good thing to include. But again, for the tournaments, anytime you're going to anything, whether you know the coach is going to be there or not, just tell them. And if we are going to be there, you know, we'll certainly come watch you play.
Cool, thanks. Yeah, and then the other piece is student-driven, which again, contacting the coaches, recruiting questionnaires. You can often on teams' websites find a button that says like, recruit me, or like recruit questionnaire. So that's another place to start. I'm gonna hit on these next two pieces, which are early reads, or some schools call them pre-reads, and then financial aid. So some schools, not all schools, and all those of us who do them a little bit differently. Some schools do early admission reads, which means you're going to submit some academic material to a coach, and that coach is going to probably relay it to someone in the Office of Admission, so that someone in the Office of Admission can give the coach, and thereby you, some idea of your competitiveness in terms of academics. So these work differently everywhere. I've worked for a couple of schools, and they've worked differently everywhere that I have worked, that have been Division III institutions. But it's a good idea, if a coach asks you for that material, I would try and get it. It typically includes something like, at Denison, for example, your transcript through the first semester of your junior year, an anticipated list of senior courses, maybe a test score. If the school is test optional, it probably isn't a part of that read. And then the coach will likely initiate a conversation with you, Amanda, correct me if I'm wrong, about that admissibility. Some schools you can go further, and those might also include some indication of your financial aid. Like, for example, at Denison, we will do an early financial aid read for you that's based on your need-based aid, so that especially if you're considering early decision, which is the next slide, you can have a very good idea of your financial package, because it's such an important part of so many families' decisions. And no coach wants you to commit and then pull out because of a financial package. We'd rather give you the financial package up front, and then you can make a more informed decision. Do you have anything to add to that, Amanda? If not.
No, I mean, yeah, I agree. I think the early reads and everything I just love that we have that at Denison. It just makes everyone's life so much better. And the early financial aid read as well. I mean, it is so important. Like I said, it just earlier, as I kind of quickly mentioned this, for us, a lot of times, kind of at least a general idea of the money you're going to receive, and that, what your competitiveness is as far as getting into Denison potentially in June or July. So, I mean, it's pretty awesome, to kind of have that heads up.
Yeah, and again, many schools do similar things. It just is going to be dependent. So don't think that you go through the process at Denison and that's going to be the same at another Division III school. So just, as Amanda said earlier, ask questions. Make sure you're informed and don't assume anything. There's also often someone in the offices of admission or the office of admission at schools who manages this process. And you can always reach out to them as well. So a little bit about that timeline, admission. What is this crazy thing I'm saying about early decision? This is kind of a pretty general guideline, but I tried to put something together so that you would have an idea of what the different rounds in admission are. So early action, typically the deadline for schools that have early action is early to mid-November, anywhere from November 1st, honestly, through November 30th at some schools. Early action is you're going to submit your application early, and you are going to get notified of your admission decision early. There's no binding agreement. You just get some of your work done early. Some students are like, well, why wouldn't I apply everywhere early action? Great question. One, not every school has early action. And two, there are these things called supplements at a lot of schools, application supplements that can be, you can also just hear that as essays, additional essays. And some students just can't get those all done early enough. But early action is one round. Early decision, that's what Coach Daniels has been talking about. Those are sometimes the same kind of deadline as early action. So early to mid-November, sometimes through November 30th, but more likely November 1st and November 15th for round one, and then maybe a late December, early January deadline for early decision 2. Early decision is a binding agreement. So if you find a school, a team, a coach, and you are like, I know that this school is the school for me, early decision might be a great choice for you, because if you apply early decision to Denison, for example, and you are admitted, that means you are coming to Denison, which is why Coach Daniels said it's a great option. You're like done in November. You don't have to worry about any more college applications, but it's not something to be taken lightly because this really should be very serious. You can also only apply early decision to one school at a time. So if you apply early decision 1 to a school and are not admitted, you can then apply early decision 2 to another school, but you can't, for example, apply early decision to 2 schools at once. And you have to sign a special contract for early decision. The third type of admission is rolling admission. Some schools have started that process as of now. So August, sometimes through January, maybe later. That means that they are admitting or they're giving admission decisions on a rolling basis. So if you apply in early August, you might hear late August, maybe September. So that's rolling. And then regular decision is probably what most people would say is the most, quote, traditional admission timeline. That's when the deadline is typically like January 1st, January 15th. And then you're going to hear in mid-March, early April, and you have to get back to a college in the beginning of May. So that is a little bit about the admission timeline. And it's really important, I included this because it's really important that you know the timeline of your coaches, of your schools. So, you know, as Coach Daniel said, she's almost done with her class. She tries to recruit heavily through early decision. You need to ask the coach, and Coach Daniels, please chime in here if there are other questions about timeline you can ask, but like, do you need to be applying early decision to have a spot on a team, to be an official recruit? Can you wait until regular decision? Really important because every coach, every sport is different. Would you agree?
Oh, absolutely. And again, even just within women's lacrosse, it can be handled differently. And some, you'll find some coaches that are, you know, going to say like, I'm going to need a decision by this certain time, or, you know, other things, and that's not necessarily how we handle it, but that can happen too. And so just asking, you know, what is your recruiting philosophy, or what is your timeline? And, you know, for us, I know I love to know that about our prospective student athletes as well. Like, what is your timeline? Because to me, both of our timelines are important. And, you know, just kind of understanding that. And some coaches may not be, you know, ready to offer spots as early. So it just, and that's not a bad thing. It just kind of depends. So it's just always good to get ahead of that, that question and that situation, and just know so you're not left wondering. And again, across different sports, I mean, seasons are obviously at different times, and so those timelines are going to shift just from that as well.
Yeah. Okay. Our final slide before some questions. Other considerations. So again, just that early pre-read process, asking about that. Some schools, you know, if you can't ask too early most of the time, because like some schools won't start, we won't start doing them until second semester of a student's junior year. So, you know, if you're a first year student watching this and you want to pre-read, like, you're probably going to have to wait a couple of years because we don't have enough academic information for you. But again, just really remembering that it's going to differ from school to school. So if anything else, I feel like the point of this all is to be in contact and ask questions. Again, differences across sports, across institutions. So again, just don't assume that because women's lacrosse at Denison works one way, that it works the same way anywhere else. And then recruiting in COVID. Amanda, do you want to talk a little bit about like your approach and look into your crystal ball that you have and what you're going to do?
Yeah, I'll do the best I can. I mean, it's, you know, it's a process, and as we all know, it's ever evolving every day, right? And so for us, like, there have been lacrosse tournaments going on this summer, but we haven't been able to go to any of them. So it's just, you know, it's an interesting thing. And so what that kind of shifted more for us was, you know, needing to rely on film a bit more, which was okay. And, you know, a lot more, I don't feel like more phone conversations. I was getting recruits in touch with players, you know, and the NCAA kind of loosened up some rules this summer to help us. And I think that may continue kind of in the fall, but even just keeping up to date with normal NCAA rules can be tough because they do change pretty frequently, and they're different through the divisions. So that's always confusing. The nice thing with Division 3 is usually there aren't too many rules, so they're a little easier to keep up with. So, you know, as far as going forward from here, you know, I'm hopeful we'll be able to see some live play this fall. But really, you know, virtual tours, feeling safe visiting campuses, and, you know, that are open, and trying to do some of that stuff is still going to be important. But I think we're all just needing to think outside the box and, just kind of adapt and evolve as we need to. I think there are, certainly something we're considering is some virtual prospect days and, all of those sort of things, because all of that stuff is really important. And for me, I have a hard time thinking that someone can choose a school without seeing the campus, but then also, without meeting players on the team. And that's where, having those interactions is still going to be really important. And that should be important to you as the prospect as well, because these are people you're going to be spending your time with. So it's important to get to know them, or at least be able to see them interact and ask them questions and that sort of thing. So ask for that. If it's not offered to you, ask. Like if the coach doesn't say, hey, let's get on the phone, and you want to talk to them, ask. Because if they say no, then I think you can understand they're probably not that interested, and it's helpful, right? I think it's helpful for everyone. It's helpful for us when we know you're not interested anymore, and it's helpful for you to know we're not interested anymore. So, sometimes you just have to ask and kind of control your own process as much as you can, kind of with that. So again, I don't know if that really answers that question very well, but it's, I think we all are just doing our best to adapt as we go forward.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that answered it as much as any of us can. I always say when people ask me questions about this or anything else in admission related to COVID, like, I wish I had a crystal ball. If I did, I would be the most powerful woman in the world, right? So, I mean, this isn't on the slide, but do you have any examples of questions that students can ask a coach kind of to understand the coach's maybe like culture or style? Maybe not, but.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I really love when prospective students do ask those questions and have those questions kind of prepared. I think it's really helpful, and I will get to some specific questions, but I think it's really helpful to have, even if it's just like 5 questions that you're going to ask every coach that you talk to, and then the conversation can kind of go, like, new questions might pop in your head, and of course you should ask those, but I think it's just really helpful to kind of have that, because it's such a comparison sort of thing, and it's just important to kind of be able to at least have something to kind of compare with each other. So I think coaching philosophy is a great question. Just what is your coaching philosophy? Coaching style, that sort of question. I love when they ask about team chemistry. I mean, mostly because I get to then brag about my team and how awesome they are with, and understanding that their team chemistry is so important and so great. But I think that's a really good question to understand. There are so many good questions, and I still love it when I get a new one. It's kind of like stumps me. It's like, oh, that's a new one. That's fun. But yeah, just be prepared. And I don't have all the magic questions for you. It's going to vary for what is important to you, and I think someone's coaching style is probably pretty important. Are you someone that's motivated more by someone who's going to, get on you and yell and scream, or someone who, is a little more even keeled, or, what is that like for you? Or does that not matter? I mean, it doesn't have to matter to everyone. What are their priorities? How do they handle class conflicts and that sort of thing, especially for a place like Denison that's, academically rigorous, obviously, and all of Division III academics should 100% be the most important thing. And, just making sure that coach is on board with that. We get asked about travel abroad a lot and things like that. So, just kind of understanding what it is that's most important to you about your experience for those next 4 years. Because for most of us, that's where that, at least competitive sports career, that's the highest you're going to get to there. And you want it to be a great 4 years.
Yeah. So here is our contact information, but I think there are a few questions that Allie's going to ask us.
There are. Thank you, Caitlin.
Yes.
So we have one question. Could an athlete ask for an early read, or is that something that is typically only offered by a coach?
You can certainly ask, I would say. I know for us, if it's something we want to do, like we'll offer it for sure, but I have been asked that. And a lot of times it either just opens the door to the conversation of, you know, either we're happy to do that, but just understand here's kind of where you stand in our recruiting, you know, depth chart and everything. Or it may be, you know, we just hadn't gotten around to it yet. I think it's certainly perfectly fine to ask for that. Just be prepared for them, you know, to give you a hard truth, which isn't a bad thing to find out, right? But it may not turn out that way too. So it's not the worst thing if you ask, and if they haven't offered yet, it simply might be they just, you know, hadn't gotten around to it yet. Because again, those timelines, they differ, so you don't know.
Also, some schools truthfully don't really offer them. Many schools do, but some, you know, I would say on at least the admission side, when student athletes ask me about them, I say, yes, we do them. You need to contact the coach. But there are places where there isn't as much of a culture of early reads or early, you know, pre-reads, whatever you want to call them. So.
Right. Absolutely. But I do know for us, like, to, even before early reads are kind of allowed, I think it's helpful. I always ask about academics, and I'm sure most coaches will, but even just to include that transcript on an email, I mean, coaches are usually know at least enough to give you some basic kind of feedback. That's fair to say.
Yeah.
And we have a question about the questionnaire. So how do you evaluate players based on the recruit questionnaire? Do you reach out to everyone who submits, or do you filter them based on the program's needs?
For us, again, we will respond to everyone who fills out the questionnaire. And it's, you know, more so to acknowledge the fact that you have filled out this questionnaire. And then it kind of puts the ball back in your court, you know, depending on what year you are and where you are in that timeline and process and everything, you know, as far as letting us know when you're playing and, you know, that sort of thing. We don't eliminate anyone just from a questionnaire. I would say, I would imagine maybe sports that are a little smaller and do have very specialized positions, maybe some of that goes on. But again, I think it's always your best idea is to fill out the questionnaire and email the coach. Like, you should be doing both of those things right off the bat. It's just the better way to make sure that they're seeing it and that people aren't falling through the cracks.
Right. I mean, plus also, Coach Sanders, a lot of the time, if they haven't filled it out and they email you, aren't you going to ask them to fill it out to get them into your system?
Absolutely, yeah.
So.
Yeah, for sure.
And then going along with the kind of the recruitment process and the forms, we had someone ask, is it too late if a student hasn't begun the process or reached out to a coach before junior year?
No, it's never too late. Never too late. You know, you just got, trust me, even us, like, and we are a little faster through the timeline. We've just recently have gotten new interest from rising seniors, and, you know, it's harder just from our situation, but it's definitely not too late. And there are schools where it may not work out with us. There are certainly schools where it will. So don't ever shut that door. We even have, you know, players who have already, or prospective students who have already, you know, applied to Denison and then email that they're coming and they'd like to try out, and, you know, that works for us. And again, that's just a question to each coach, but no, it's not too late. Everyone has on a different timeline. Don't worry about that. Just, you know, start emailing some coaches, finding some schools that are, you know, sound interesting to you, that you feel like, you know, you can play at, or just want to see if you can play at, and try. I mean, it's just not going to hurt to try.
Yeah, the worst you're going to hear is it's too late because I filled that position. But if you don't ask, you're not going to get anything.
How common are walk-ons in Division III athletics and at Denison?
So I'll speak for us, we have, it kind of depends on the year. So this fall we have 4 walk-ons, and that's a pretty high number for us. Last year we didn't have any, and the year before we had a few. So, you know, it's certainly not that uncommon at Denison, I would say. And I think as far as I'm aware, most coaches are open to at least offering that tryout period and everything, you know, and depending on kind of the situation of the team and the roster size and the needs of the team, your skill and everything else, like, you know, it's obviously not that guarantee, but the opportunity, you know, should be there. And I think that would be mostly true across all of Division III. I feel like what's so great about Division III is just that, you know, we care about the entire student athlete experience. So just kind of across all facets of it. You know, those who come in to play lacrosse, like that is not their main focus, and they have the opportunity to do a lot of other things while playing, you know, lacrosse at a high level. And so, you know, I think the opportunity is there at most D3 schools, I would have to say.
Yeah, from my knowledge, and I have friends who are head coaches elsewhere, I completely agree.
Caitlin, I have a question for you. If you apply early decision 1 to Denison, is the admissions decision made in December, or did the slide mean it is rolling?
Oh, I'm sorry. I did not say that. So early decision, you're typically going to hear within about a month. The timeline depends on the school. At Denison, sometimes we do it more on an early decision on somewhat of a rolling basis, but that's not every year. But you will hear earlier than that regular decision deadline. So for us, the deadline, for example, is November 15th, and we will get back to you by December 15th. And that, again, I've worked at a number of institutions, and that's fairly common within about a month timeline.
And I have another one for you if my screen would roll. If you have sent in your transcript and seen your schedule, how long do you wait to hear from the coach regarding the early read?
I cannot speak for any other institution. At Denison, I'm the person that does the early reads, and I tell the coaching staff they need to give me 2 weeks. I don't think I've ever taken 2 weeks on a read. Maybe I have. So I would say, you know, give it 2-3 weeks. I'm not sure. Every coach probably handles the communication to the student differently, right, Amanda? But I wouldn't say if you don't hear back like within 24 hours, it's because there are some other people behind the scenes doing things too.
Yeah, and I know for our process, I will usually just say, you know, you'll receive an email from Caitlin, Latta. Keep an eye out for that. But what I have found, and I ask them to let me know when they've heard. So, and then if I don't hear from them and I know the early read has been done, I will reach out if it's been a little while. I think sometimes, and something to just be aware of, whatever email address that you put into that front rush like questionnaire or submit to Denison is where it's going to go. And sometimes I've found that is like your mom's email or the email she doesn't check anymore sometimes. So, you know, it's just important to kind of know that. So if you don't hear back for a while, reach out and ask what's going on, because you've probably just missed it somehow.
Yeah.
And one about COVID. If the COVID situation prevents you from visiting campus, will that be a disadvantage to you in the admission and recruiting process?
So I can speak from the admission point, and then Amanda, I'll let you, again, look into that crystal ball of yours. So no, it will not disadvantage you. I will say that at schools, I mean, no one can visit most schools, right? So just remember that it feels like this is only happening to you or only happening to your student. This is happening to students everywhere. No students can visit most schools. And so it's really important to look kind of at schools' virtual opportunities. So a lot of schools are doing things like this webinar. but more specific to schools. So whether it's a virtual information session, virtual interviews, we'll be doing more Denison specific webinars. So that's how you can both learn about the school and express interest to the Office of Admission. Recruitment wise, Amanda?
Yeah. So no, it wouldn't disadvantage you. Again, it's just that idea, like if someone isn't able to visit Denison that we've seen play and have talked to, and like all the other boxes have been checked off, like visiting campus is for you. It's a great opportunity for me as the coach to get to know you and, you know, get to speak with you in person and all of that stuff. But there are ways around that we can certainly do. It's more so for you. So to see the campus and really get more of that feel for it. So that's where we're all going to do our best to kind of help you have the most kind of insight into who we are, into who Denison is, into, you know, what the campus is like and all that stuff as best we can. If you're unable to visit, it would not make me say you can't commit because you haven't visited. So if you feel comfortable, and we've been able to do everything we can, you know, it's not going to stop kind of that conversation from continuing forward, in my opinion.
Perfect. Next question. If a coach doesn't reply to an email, should you continue to follow up or assume that they are not interested?
Follow up. I think that, especially depending on the time of year and what grade you're in, it is possible that an email gets overlooked on accident. And, you know, just say, I just wanted to follow up, haven't heard from you in a while. Am I still a prospect that you're considering? I'm really interested, would love to talk to you sometime. I mean, just something that's going to, you know, really make a coach respond because you're asking for that response. You know, it's, you know, it might be the chance of that they weren't that interested and therefore they just kind of missed the email, or I don't know, maybe some coaches do that on purpose. I can't imagine too many do, just ignore you until you go away. But, you know, just ask that question, follow up, and, you know, get the answer you're looking for, because a lot of times it might just be, oh, I'm so sorry. I just, you know, everyone has 100 things going on, right? And so we do make mistakes as well. So definitely follow up.
Wait, coaches are humans, Amanda? They make mistakes?
Yeah, sometimes. Yeah.
Caitlin, is it possible to receive more than, I think it's more than what they're, is it, so it's a, I think a money question. Is it possible to receive more than what the early read offers?
I'm going to assume that's like the early financial aid.
Yes.
So this is going to be like really specific to the school. So I would say that the most common and worst admission answer is it really depends, right? Really depends on the school. At Denison, we try and really give you a good understanding of your financial package, of your maximum probably financial package. So, but it really, really depends. At most schools, you can appeal your financial aid, but that would be a process that happens after the official admission decision and final package is sent to you. So again, it really depends. But I would talk to the offices of financial aid or the specific admission people at the schools where you are being recruited.
And then we have another question that asks, can students get into sports without a skills video? So can they play at the Division III level without submitting a video to the coaches?
Yes, 100%. You know, for us, again, we would like to see you, I mean, we would need to see you play to kind of give you that guaranteed roster spot in some capacity. My preference is live. I 100% want to see someone play live as much as I can. The skills video and the highlight videos to me are just a compliment again to the process. So it's nice to have, but not necessary to have. COVID, you know, era, I guess for right now, that does change that a little bit. And, more prospects have been getting kind of creative with just doing, you know, skills videos in their yard and things like that and sending those, which has been, you know, a fun new thing, but I don't think, again, something that's necessary. So no, you do not need to have to have that video. Again, some coaches might say different. This is just my opinion, and I think most coaches would like to see you play live. I think that does get tougher in a girls lacrosse world. It's, you know, club teams and tournaments and things are where we have the opportunity to see you mostly. But even if it's just your mom is filming your high school game, you know, in whatever sport it is, that's still going to be better than nothing. So it doesn't, you know, if someone can't come see you play live, if that makes sense. So I guess the short answer is no, you do not have to have a skills video.
Are there any more questions, any more burning questions you have out there about Division III athletics, what that could mean for you? Anything like that?
If you find that you have a question after we turn this off, you are free to email either of us. Our emails are here and we will do our best. Are there any others, Allie?
Are you disadvantaged if you don't play club sports?
Again, from the lacrosse world is where I'll start. It makes it a little harder. It doesn't make it impossible. I think, again, it's just like you're going to need to have some film of your high school games, but it certainly doesn't stop us from wanting to recruit you if we see that you're a good player. Other sports, you don't have clubs, so I guess it kind of depends, and have more kind of high school tournaments and things like that. So, you know, it's hard for me to answer kind of outside of the lacrosse world. It is easier for us to recruit through clubs. Again, that's Denison's kind of situation, but it's certainly not going to shut doors on you. It might just mean a little more effort elsewhere, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So in order to be respectful of everyone's time, I think we're going to end it there. And if there are any unanswered questions, I will follow up with you after, because I can get a record of all of these questions. Thank you so much for joining us. We have a few more webinars if you want to see them, including like admission trivia, and you'll have a leg up on the athletics piece if you join because you came to this. But thanks so much again. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you, Allie. Thank you, Amanda. Really appreciate you joining today. And everyone have a fantastic evening or night, depending on where you are. So bye, everyone.